During the ninth hearing of President Yoon's impeachment trial today, the respective sides made their cases for and against the president's martial law declaration and his removal from office. President Yoon made an appearance at the court, but returned to the detention center before the hearing began. As a means to deal with Trump's tariff policy, the authorities come up with a broader plan to support Korean exporters, which includes export vouchers for smaller companies and a record amount in trade finance. High-level diplomatic talks between the U.S. and Russia kick off over in Riyadh to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. We take a closer look at what's at stake. It's February 18th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start at the Constitutional Court, where the ninth hearing of President Yoon's impeachment trial took place today. For details, we have our correspondent Oh Soo-young standing by. Soo-young, I understand today's hearing saw the two sides laying out their respective arguments with regard to the legality of the president's declaration of martial law.
That's right, Hong-min. Today's hearing began at 2 p.m. and lasted for about 4 hours and 40 minutes. But without the presence of President Yoon, he was on his way to the court hearing but decided to turn back, according to his lawyers. He was supposed to make the appearance as he has for the past 6 hearings, but he ended up sitting out the 9th hearing today. As the last few hearings focused on questioning witnesses, today's session was intended for each side, the National Assembly's impeachment team and President Yoon's lawyers, to summarize their cases for and against impeachment and to go over the evidence that the bench hasn't covered yet. To go over the main arguments so far, the National Assembly's panel has claimed that Yoon's declaration of martial law was illegal as he did not go through the proper cabinet procedures, as were his proclamation of martial law decrees. The panel says Yoon also tried to disrupt parliamentary activities by deploying troops to the National Assembly and the National Election Commission, as well as trying to arrest judicial figures. The panel continued today to claim that Yoon intended to shut down the National Assembly and cited how witnesses and other central figures have indicated that the martial law declaration was procedurally flawed.
This is a direct attack on the principles of the rule of law and the separation of powers. From the perspective of constitutional protection, it is an absolutely unacceptable act.
Meanwhile, Yoon's side has continued to insist that martial law is constitutional as an executive right of the president, and that the opposition party had made it impossible for the government to function by constantly impeaching officials, railroading controversial bills through parliament, and dramatically cutting government budget. The team on Tuesday further built on suspicions of election fraud in the general election last year, saying that there appeared to have been false ballot papers and irregularities that needed to be investigated.
Moving forward, then, what can we expect on Thursday?
Well, Thursday's hearing will see 3 witness examinations, beginning with Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. Now, Han has previously stated that the president did not hold a proper cabinet meeting before declaring martial law on December 3rd. Former Deputy Director of National Intelligence Service Hong Jang-won will also be summoned. He actually came to the witness questioning earlier this month for the National Assembly side, but he's going to return again to be questioned by Yoon's legal team. Hong has claimed that there's a list of 14 to 16 figures that the president wanted arrested under martial law. The third witness is National Police Agency Commissioner General Cho Ji-ho, who's going to stand witness after missing 2 sessions for health reasons. Both the National Assembly panel and Yoon's legal team plan to question the Prime Minister and the Police Commissioner General.
And I also hear the court rejected an earlier request by the president's defense team for a rescheduling of Thursday's session.
That's right, Hong-min. Despite President Yoon's legal team's request to postpone Thursday's hearing, which would be the 10th in the trial, to next Tuesday, the court decided to reject that request. When Yoon's team asked for a reconsideration, the bench merely pushed back the hearing by an hour so that it will now begin at 3 p.m. instead of 2 p.m. Acting Chief Justice Moon Young-bae, he suggested as Yoon's pre-trial for his criminal case that begins that day, That's at 10 a.m. The legal team should have time to make it in the afternoon. He also added that the court is also juggling 3 other trial hearings this week. So Thursday looks to be the last witness examination at this point, and as the court rejected all other applications made by Yoon's lawyers, it seems that the trial is coming to a close, and of course the court has emphasised the need for a swift trial proceeding. Now, if there's one more session scheduled to wrap up the arguments and also hear out Yoon's closing statement, it's likely that a verdict will be delivered in the first half of March.
All right, that was our Oh Soo-young with the latest on the president's impeachment trial. Moving on, both a South Korean government delegation and a business delegation are seeking talks with relevant American officials in the U.S. as the Trump administration prepares a broader blanket of tariffs on its trading partners. Lee Seung-jae has more.
South Korea's Deputy Minister for Trade Park Jong-won arrived in the United States on Monday, where he's set to meet with a number of officials at the U.S. Department of Commerce and the Office of the U.S. Trade Representatives. Upon arrival, Park stressed the importance of holding the talks, especially as U.S. President Donald Trump's trade policies affect all of America's trading partners.
I believe America's major trading partners around the world are all affected, so I think that our country also needs to be even more careful in negotiating with the United States.
Park also said that he would seek mutually beneficial discussions during his talks in Washington by listening to what the U.S. has to say and explaining Seoul's positions. He also noted that talks on the tariff issue may continue following his visit, raising speculation that Industry Minister An Deok-keun could also visit the U.S. for high-level talks. Amid growing concerns over the impact Trump's tariffs may have on South Korea's economy, a business delegation led by the chairman of SK Group and the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Choi Tae-won, will visit Washington for a 2-day visit starting Wednesday. It will mark the first visit by a Korean business delegation since the Trump administration took office last month. The Korea International Trade Association also plans to send a 10-member delegation to a number of southern states next month to promote South Korea's investments in the region. The Federation of Korean Industries is also looking to send a delegation to the U.S. Faced with Trump's aggressive trade policies, South Korean businesses are expected to seek strategies to mitigate the risk of operating in the U.S. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Against this backdrop, a set of measures has been unveiled to help local exporters, bracing for the impact of the U.S. tariff plans. Our Lee Soo-jin explains what these measures entail.
The South Korean government on Tuesday announced plans to offer a broad range of support services to companies affected by U.S. President Trump's recent tariff threats and is also working to diversify its export markets. This comes amid growing concerns about the potential impact of tariffs on exports, especially given their critical role in driving Korea's economic growth.
Last year, exports supported our struggling economy. They grew by 8.1% annually to a record high, leading Korea to become the world's 6th largest exporter. However, policy shifts from the new U.S. administration have made this year's outlook more uncertain than ever.
The remarks were made during an export strategy meeting where the acting president announced that the government would provide export vouchers for small and medium-sized enterprises. With these vouchers, companies can receive consultations in various fields, including legal, taxation, marketing, and certifications. And 90% of the 240 billion won, or around $166 million US budget for the vouchers will be allocated in the first half of the year. The government also announced that it will offer tax benefits to companies relocating to Korea due to shifts in the global trade environment, even before they have fully scaled down their overseas operations. As part of further efforts to provide financial relief, the government will provide short-term liquidity for companies hit by tariff threats by supplying around $254 billion in trade financing this year, a record high amount. The country's export market is also expected to become more diversified in the future as the government is aiming to expand into countries such as Mexico, South Africa, Vietnam, and India by setting up 5 new export centers overseas. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The National Assembly's Strategy and Finance Committee on Tuesday passed an amendment to the so-called K-CHIPS Act to give bigger tax breaks to support the nation's chip industries. Specifically, this would raise the integrated investment tax credit rate for semiconductor companies by 5 percentage points from the current level of 15% to 20% for large and mid-sized companies, and 25 to 30% for small businesses. This is expected to pass a plenary session at a later date. The committee also discussed other tax breaks, including extending the tax credit period on semiconductor R&D until 2031, while other national strategic industries to 2029. Meanwhile, the government and the ruling People Power Party announced on Tuesday their plan to enhance AI industry competitiveness. This includes actively expanding high-performance GPU and other infrastructure, while also implementing measures to support talent development. They also agreed on the need to accelerate the expansion of national AI infrastructure and strengthen the foundation for growth across the AI R&D environments and the overall computing ecosystem. To achieve this, the government and the private sector will collaborate to secure 10,000 high-performance GPUs within this year and launch the National AI Computing Center services ahead of schedule. Korea's auto exports lost substantial ground in January, owing to fewer working days, given the prolonged Lunar New Year holiday. Choi Soo-hyung covers the latest data.
South Korea's automobile exports saw a sharp decline last month. Data from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy released on Tuesday shows that the declines were impacted by fewer working days due to the Lunar New Year holiday in the last week of January. The country's auto exports totaled $4.99 billion in January, nearly 20% down from a year ago. While this figure fell short of last year's all-time high for the month, it still marks the second largest January export value on record. By volume, exports dropped nearly 18%, with Hyundai Motor and Kia Motor both seeing double-digit declines. Hyundai shipped over 85,000 units, down more than 15%, while Kia's exports fell nearly 18% to just under 77,000. Among the smaller auto firms, KG Mobility and Renault Korea recorded export growth, while GM Korea saw a decline of nearly 30%. Eco-friendly vehicle exports declined slightly, dropping more than 4% overall. While hybrid and plug-in hybrid exports surged, demand for electric vehicles weakened, with EV shipments plunging by nearly 42%. As well as fewer working days in January, a high base effect from the record-breaking performance last January also played a role. Following U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement that tariffs could be imposed on automobiles starting in early April, a significant impact is expected. Although the exact plan has not been revealed yet, it is predicted that any decision will greatly affect South Korea, as more than half of its automobile exports go to the U.S. The domestic sales volume in January exceeded 105,000 units, marking a 9% decrease compared to the same month last year. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea's military has deployed a new locally developed bunker buster missile to its frontline units that can destroy North Korean targets buried deep underground. The Korean Tactical Surface-to-Surface missile is capable of striking North Korean command facilities and long-range artillery systems that threaten South Korea's capital area. Also named Ure, or Thunder in Korean, the missile has a range of 180 kilometers and is equipped with a warhead that can penetrate several meters underground. Development began back in November 2010. Authorities say Chinese AI application DeepSeek has indeed transferred user data to a third party amid data privacy concerns. Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
South Korean data privacy regulators have confirmed that DeepSeek, the Chinese artificial intelligence startup facing controversy over data collection, has shared user data with TikTok's parent company, ByteDance. The Personal Information Protection Commission said on Tuesday that although they were able to confirm the transmission of user data, it is yet to determine the exact nature and amount of data transferred. The PIPC launched an independent investigation into DeepSeek's data collection and processing methods after requesting clarification on the matter from the firm last month, finding that DeepSeek's privacy policy fell short of the requirements listed for service providers in the country's Personal Information Protection Act.
Under South Korean law, transferring personal data overseas or moving it from one country to another requires a legal basis. In this case, while ByteDance does have a headquarters in the U.S., when the PIPC says that user data was sent to ByteDance, it means there was an international data transfer. So the concern is whether DeepSeek complied with South Korea's regulations on cross-border data transfers.
The firm acknowledged that it had not fully considered South Korean data protection laws when launching its global service and took the recommendation of the PIPC to temporarily suspend services in South Korea while necessary modifications are made. This means that no new users can download the app across any domestic app market such as Apple's App Store and Google Play, but existing users can continue to use it for the time being as the PIPC considers further measures to protect existing users. During the suspension period, the PIPC plans to continue its thorough review of DeepSeek's handling practices. Legislative efforts are also underway to amend the Personal Information Protection Act to reflect AI innovation with this latest development, strengthening enforcement measures for foreign service providers. Experts say that it will be necessary to consider other AI services for legislative changes, not just DeepSeek.
Clear discussions on what standards should apply to all the new AI systems that will come out in the future are needed. AI is only going to become more widespread, and for it to provide more personalized services, it's going to need access to more of our personal information.
The PIPC also plans to seek stronger international cooperation on AI-related data privacy regulations at the Global Privacy Assembly in Seoul this September. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Talks started in Saudi Arabia to discuss ending the war in Ukraine involving U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. For more on this, we have our Kim Bo-kyung in the studio. Bo-kyung, first of all, what could be on Trump and Putin's minds?
Well, Jung-min, it seems Trump and Putin have agreed on some parts during their recent phone talks, conceding some Ukrainian territory and Kyiv not being part of NATO. The fact that Trump agreed to what U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said, that a return to Ukraine's old borders is an illusory goal and how its NATO membership was unrealistic, shows this. Given that Russia is making grinding progress on the battlefield, Moscow could be calculating whether it is better to strike a peace deal, giving Trump a huge win, or to continue the fight. And to raise the chances of the peace deal, Trump has already demanded Russia be readmitted to the group of 8 industrialized nations. One expert says this could have been a big incentive for Putin to come to the negotiating table. Let's take a look.
I'd love to have him back. I think it was a mistake to throw him out. I think Putin would love to be back.
The most important thing is that Donald Trump promised Vladimir Putin to get Russia back as a member of the international community, showing his desire to restore economic relations with Russia. This implies that most of the sanctions would be lifted in the near future. Guaranteeing economic activities again, I think that served as a significant incentive for Putin.
Now, Ukraine is not a party to this meeting in Riyadh. How is Kyiv reacting to this, and what could be the most concerning part for the war-torn nation?
Well, despite U.S. officials suggesting that Ukraine and Europe would have a role in any kind of peace talk, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday dismissed Tuesday's negotiations taking place without him and told reporters that he did not know anything about them. And in response to recent U.S. statements about ruling out Ukraine's NATO membership, Zelensky cautioned the West against repeating past mistakes, warning that it could lead to a scenario similar to Afghanistan in 2021, where the Western troops hastily withdrew from Afghanistan, leading to the Taliban quickly seizing Kabul and taking power. The expert says Ukraine knew it could be difficult to be a member of NATO and to restore all territory taken by Moscow. What matters for Kyiv is strong security guarantees.
If Ukraine does not join NATO, the key question is what kind of security guarantees the international community can offer. The fact that such discussions are not taking place at the same time as the peace talks is what is making Zelensky uneasy. The most crucial issue for Ukraine is whether a strong security guarantee system can be established as an alternative to NATO.
And Europe, too, has been sidelined from these peace talks. What's been the response from European leaders?
Well, Europe, too, is trying to raise its voices, holding emergency talks in Paris on Monday, as it is quite clear that the U.S. is set on diminishing its footprint in Europe. The leaders' meeting reportedly focused on the potential deployment of European troops to Ukraine and the willingness of European allies to step up defense spending. The expert says European countries will eventually have to take more responsibility for the security of Ukraine for their own sake. Listen to this.
All Europeans have to step up when it comes to Ukraine and at the same time step up when it comes to defense spending at home, because Russia is threatening all Europe now, unfortunately.
Trump does not consider NATO of high value and believes that Europe should take responsibility for its own security. So it seems clear that NATO allies will have to take on a greater role.
All right, Po-kyung, thank you for the wrap-up. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Spring seemed like it was coming around, but the seasons have gone backward to winter. The cold wave warnings, which were issued mainly in the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do and northeastern parts of Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces, have been extended further today. The cold will be fierce tomorrow morning, with the feels-like temperature plunging to minus 12 degrees Celsius in Seoul. For the rest of the week, the morning temperature in Seoul is expected to remain around minus 7 degrees. Please dress extra warm when you go out. Tomorrow will be a bit colder than today across the country, with Gwangju and Busan at minus 4 degrees. Daily highs will stay in the single digits. Seoul will move up to only 1 degree. It will reach 3 degrees in Chuncheon and Daejeon. There's heavy snow advisory for Ulleungdo and Dokdo Islands. Up to 20 centimeters of heavy snow will fall by Thursday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
that is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.